When you look at a map of the global economy, it's incredibly easy to just see these vast oceans, massive continents, and just assume that international trade is this, unstoppable force.
Right, yeah. You picture thousands of cargo ships just seamlessly crisscrossing the globe.
Exactly, moving oil, gas, consumer goods, basically whatever we need, wherever we need it. But if you actually zoom in, right between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman, there is this tiny, tiny strip of water.
The Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah, the Strait of Hormuz. And it's only about, 39 miles wide at its narrowest point?
Yeah, 39 miles, which, geopolitically speaking, is nothing.
It's basically a puddle. And because of the deep water channels that these massive supertankers actually require, the usable shipping lanes are only about 2 miles wide in either direction.
Right. It is a literal geographical pinch point, and it completely defies the logic of a decentralized global economy. A massive percentage of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas has to squeeze through those 2-mile wide lanes every single day.
Just 2 miles.
Yeah. And if those lanes are shut down or, even severely restricted because of a conflict, the global economy doesn't just slow down. It doesn't just experience some inflation.
It's way worse than that.
Oh, absolutely. Entire industrial sectors go into cardiac arrest.
And that cardiac arrest is exactly what we are diving into today. We're looking at a huge stack of geopolitical analyses, economic reports, and some really fascinating linguistic sources, all focused on the global impacts of a potential U.S. Iran conflict.
Specifically, what happens if the Strait of Hormuz is actually blockaded?
Right. But we are tackling this massive geopolitical crisis through a really unique lens today. We are going to decode a single, highly refined Korean term that basically encapsulates this entire situation for a country that is uniquely vulnerable. So, okay, let's unpack this, because realizing how understanding one specific foreign word can unlock a whole new perspective on global supply chains is just deeply fascinating.
It really is. Language is a direct mirror of geopolitical reality. When a physical bottleneck in the Middle East is threatened, the vocabulary used by media halfway across the world, in South Korea, completely shifts.
Yeah, the whole tone changes.
Exactly. We're going to examine how an energy crisis doesn't just change commodity markets.
Yeah.
It fundamentally alters the language a nation uses to describe its own survival.
Which is heavy. But before we can really grasp that language, we need to establish the sheer scale of the vulnerability here. We have to talk about South Korea's Achilles heel, because according to the research we're looking at, South Korea relies on the Strait of Hormuz for a staggering 99% of its Middle Eastern crude oil imports.
99%. It's almost absolute.
It is absolute. For a modern industrialized nation to be that dependent on a single maritime transit route.
Energy ceases to be a mere commodity at that point.
Yeah.
In the West, we often view energy disruptions through the lens of fluctuating prices at the gas pump.
Right, oh no, gas went up 50 cents.
Exactly. Or maybe, right, you can't just do that. South Korea has built massive, multi-billion-dollar refining complexes that are chemically calibrated to process Middle Eastern crude oil.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this crude is typically heavier and has a higher sulfur content. The industry calls it sour crude.
Sour crude. Okay.
And you can't just suddenly import light, sweet crude from, say, Texas or the North Sea and just pour it into those same refineries. It would severely compromise their efficiency.
So they're physically stuck with this specific type of oil.
Yes. Reconfiguring those plants to process different crude takes years and massive capital investment.
So they are literally hardwired into this specific supply chain. It's not just about who is selling the oil, it's about what kind of oil the machine was built to eat in the first place.
Precisely.
So if the Strait of Hormuz closes, South Korea can't simply pivot to a different supplier on a whim. The infrastructure itself is a trap.
It is a trap. And that physical infrastructural reality is exactly why South Korean media and policymakers instantly elevate a threat in the Middle East from a mere, economic headache to a full-blown national security crisis.
Because when the flow stops,
factories halt. Power grids face blackout conditions, and the economic lifeblood of the country is completely cut off.
Which brings us perfectly to how this crisis is expressed in the language. Because this is fundamentally about the survival of that engine, the words the media uses carry this immense, almost suffocating weight. And the core term dominating our sources today is JESA, which translates to energy security.
The linguistics here are just so revealing of the geopolitical mindset. So KESA is simply the English loanword for energy, directly transliterated.
Right, ENEOG.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But K's, onbo, is a Sino-Korean term, This means it's based on Hanja, the Chinese characters that form the root of a lot of Korea's formal and academic vocabulary.
And let's really break down those Hanja roots, because when I saw the literal translation of this in the notes, it was a massive light bulb moment for me.
Oh, it's brilliant. So the first character, Gron, represents peace, safety, or stability. Think of it as a state of tranquility or an absence of chaos.
Right, so peace.
And the second character means to protect, to defend, or to maintain.
Okay, so when you put those together...
When you synthesize them, doesn't mean some vague, passive sense of security. It literally translates to the active process of securing peace or defending stability.
Securing peace, I mean, that is a military-grade concept being applied to barrels of oil.
It is entirely militaristic.
Yeah.
And for anyone studying Korean or, just trying to understand how Korean media frames global events, there's a very crucial distinction to make right here.
Oh, between this and the regular word for safety.
Right, exactly. There's a common everyday word for safety, which is engine. You use A for everyday localized things.
So like wearing a seatbelt.
Yeah, wearing a seatbelt for safety, ensuring a construction site is up to code, or, making sure food is safe to eat. That's here.
So what does this all mean for you when you're absorbing this information? It means you would never use array to describe the national energy grid. Using ARA elevates the conversation immediately. It highlights a grand systemic existential issue.
Right. It's the exact same word used in IRA, which is national security, or in, food security.
So the precision of the language perfectly matches the severity of the geopolitical threat.
It does. When a nation is 99% reliant on a single strait for its sour crude, they aren't just securing oil to keep inflation down. By securing that oil, they are literally securing peace. They are defending the stability of their entire society from total collapse.
That is heavy. And understanding that grave weight, that onbo means defending the nation's existence, it leads us to the actual mechanics of how a country responds. Because if a U.S. Iran conflict shuts down Hormuz, the sources make it very clear the global era of cheap energy is over. So how does a nation actually pivot to protect itself when survival is on the line?
Well, it requires a brutal paradigm shift in government policy. I mean, for decades, global energy policy has been overwhelmingly focused on efficiency, open markets, and low costs.
Just get the cheapest oil possible.
Right. The goal was to get the energy needed to maximize economic growth as cheaply as possible. But when a nyagye, an energy security crisis, strikes, the entire rule book is just thrown out the window.
Efficiency doesn't matter anymore.
Economic efficiency takes a complete backseat to absolute self-reliance.
And the sources highlight two key strategies that dominate this pivot. And they introduce some really heavy vocabulary here. The first one is Domino.
Subseon dabayanhua.
Right, which means the diversification of import sources. Basically, the frantic attempts to dilute that 99% reliance on the Middle East.
But again, you have to look at the mechanics of actually doing that. If your main supply line through Hormuz is vulnerable, building new supply lines is agonizingly slow and incredibly expensive.
Because they have to go farther, right?
Exactly. It means sourcing crude from the Americas or West Africa, which involves massive transit times across the Pacific or around the Cape of Good Hope. It increases freight costs astronomically.
But they do it anyway.
Because in a jet framework, you pay that premium. You buy the more expensive, less efficient oil simply because it doesn't pass through a war zone.
Wow. And the second key phrase the media uses for this pivot is anyo aka, inyoji mixu jejoyang, which translates to the readjustment of the energy mix. And this is where the policy choices get really stark.
Very stark.
Because to secure that peace, the sources note that South Korea has to look at re-elevating nuclear power, which is FON, and even coal. I mean, the media literally refers to these older, controversial energy sources as the relief pitchers for the national grid.
Yeah, the relief pitchers. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the logic behind using these relief pitchers becomes really clear, even if it's, uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable is an understatement.
Right. But when you are entirely cut off from global supply chains, you need baseload power that you can completely control domestically.
Okay, so control is the key word.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A nuclear power plant can run for over a year on a single fueling of uranium rods. Coal can be physically stockpiled in massive quantities within your own borders. They offer an insulated physical buffer against external geopolitical shocks.
Okay, wait, hold on. I have to challenge this logic a bit. Because South Korea, like most developed nations, has been aggressively pushing towards green energy and carbon reduction, right? Firing up old coal plants and rapidly expanding nuclear energy feels like they're just throwing decades of environmental progress right out the window.
They are.
It seems completely contradictory to the long-term survival of the planet.
It is a massive contradiction.
Yeah.
And it highlights the brutal reality of an energy security crisis. The hierarchy of needs fundamentally shifts overnight.
Survival mode.
Exactly. If the lights go out, if the hospitals lose power, if the water treatment plants stop running, the immediate threat of societal collapse takes absolute precedence over any long-term climate goals.
Wow, so the future doesn't matter if you can't survive today.
The urgency of ANBO, securing the peace today, completely overrides the luxury of choosing the greenest or most sustainable option. A government's primary mandate is to ensure the country survives the current week before it can even think about planning for the next decade.
That really drives home why they use such a militaristic word. It truly is a war-footing mentality. But here's where it gets really interesting, though. South Korea firing up coal plants and scrambling for nuclear fuel is just the domestic side of the equation. And in crisis doesn't stop at crude oil, and it certainly doesn't respect national borders.
No, it doesn't.
The sources map out this massive global domino effect.
Because the Strait of Hormuz is the artery for much more than just unrefined crude oil. A blockade there immediately cripples the global supply chains for liquefied natural gas, or LNG, and fundamental petrochemical feedstocks.
And the big one mentioned in the notes is Naphtha, S in Korean. This is the link between a geopolitical conflict halfway across the world and the literal physical objects sitting on your desk right now.
Naphtha is basically the invisible building block of modern life. It's this highly versatile hydrocarbon mixture that's derived from refining crude oil. And crucially, naphtha is the primary feedstock that petrochemical plants crack to produce things like ethylene and propylene.
And what are those used for?
Those are the foundation of virtually all plastics, synthetic fibers, and industrial chemicals.
Okay, so if the flow of Middle Eastern crude stops,
The refineries stop producing naphtha.
and if the naphtha supply dries up, the petrochemical plants shut down. Which means the specialized plastics used in hospital syringes, the synthetic fibers in your clothing, the casing of the laptop you're using right now, the manufacturing of all these items just grinds to a halt.
Exactly. A blockade doesn't just mean gas prices spike. It means the physical ingredients required for global manufacturing simply cease to exist.
That is terrifying.
It is. And this widespread industrial paralysis is exactly why we see the redrawing of global alliances in the sources. Nations recognize that energy security is way too massive to handle individually. So our sources highlight the emergence of a Choyunku, a global energy security alliance.
Basically, nations banding together to secure the supply chains for these critical materials. And this actually introduces a broader concept for anyone analyzing this space, which is resource security.
Right. And it encompasses energy, but it extends much further. It includes securing the global supply of rare earth metals, lithium for batteries, even agricultural inputs.
Anything you need to survive.
Exactly. It is the grim recognition that securing peace in the 21st century requires hoarding and protecting every single raw material needed to keep a modern industrial state functioning.
And the terminology gets very precise when describing the failure of these systems. The sources use the phrase "OWEC," supply chain disruption. But in this context, it's not like a delay at the Port of Los Angeles because of a labor strike or a paperwork issue.
No, it refers to a hard physical stop.
Yeah.
The goods literally cannot move because the shipping lanes are blocked by naval vessels.
By literal warships. Okay, to really solidify how analysts and policymakers are discussing this, let's look at how these terms are deployed in real-time reporting from the sources. If you were reading a Korean financial paper covering a crisis in Hormuz, you would see sentences constructed very specifically to convey this massive weight.
Absolutely.
There's a headline in the briefs that perfectly captures this. Let's break it down for everyone listening. The sentence is, the structure here is very causal. So the first part, Yuda, establishes the trigger. That means due to the U.S. Iran war.
Okay, then we have our core term, WEO, for global energy security.
Right. And the conclusion, IOU, which literally translates to a red light has turned on.
Like a warning light. Exactly, meaning a critical warning or a crisis state. So altogether, due to the U.S.-Iran war, a red light has turned on for global energy security.
Hmm.
Notice how the use of Yogan and J dictates the entire severity of the geopolitical assessment.
It sets the whole tone. There's another sentence from a government policy briefing in the notes that shows the reaction side of things. It says, Yujan! Oh, John! Yojin!
This one outlines the state's survival mechanism. So, the South Korean government, Daejeon, in response to the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz.
And the action they are taking is Jeonnonjeon, which means is formulating measures to strengthen energy security. So putting it together, in response to the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, the South Korean government is formulating measures to strengthen energy security.
And based on our deep dive, we know exactly what those measures actually are. They are the incredibly expensive, difficult pivots we explored earlier. The Yongon diversifying away from the Middle East despite the astronomical freight costs.
And the Unokoklo, falling back on domestic coal and nuclear power as relief pitchers.
Exactly. By understanding these specific sentences, you are literally internalizing the exact logic of international relations and macroeconomics that policymakers use.
It is honestly incredible how much ground we've covered today just by pulling on the thread of one concept. I mean, we started by looking at a map of a 39-mile-wide physical bottleneck and unpacked the terrifying reality of South Korea's 99% reliance on the sour crude flowing through it.
We decoded the heavy linguistic weight of Yeju. We saw how it transcends everyday safety to mean the active, desperate pursuit of securing peace and ensuring national survival during a LIOUR.
And we explored the massive, tangible consequences of that survival mindset, how it forces countries to completely abandon the era of cheap, efficient energy. It triggers a return to coal, it redraws global resource alliances, and it physically disrupts the NAFTA supply chains that build the modern world. You didn't just get a geopolitical briefing today. You learned how to analyze global supply chain breakdowns using the precise, advanced vocabulary of a professional analyst.
And that's the key. Understanding not just what is happening, but the specific mechanisms of how it happens and the language used to command those mechanisms is the true value of analyzing these sources.
Absolutely. But as we wrap up, there is a lingering contradiction from our discussion about the energy mix that I really want to leave you with to think about.
You mean the tension between immediate survival and long-term consequences?
Exactly. Because if the era of cheap energy is truly over and nations are entirely willing to rapidly expand nuclear power and fire up heavy polluting coal plants strictly as a mandate of national survival, what happens to our global climate initiatives?
That is the big question.
Right. When the sheer panic of security completely overrides the global desire for sustainability, how do we save the planet tomorrow if nations feel they have to burn it just to survive today?